welcome back. It's Monday. We are a bit later than we usually would be, and I apologize for that. But here in Michigan, it has been raining for 2 days, which as a result, when you're in Michigan and it rains and you have a basement in your house, guess what happens? Leaky, wonderful water in the basement. Which means I have my own bit of evil in my own basement here at my own home here in Metro Detroit. And it's just been lovely. I've been up for 2 days, chipping away at the concrete floor where I had a hairline crack and watched the water rush up in the floor of my studio, where I frantically put towels down and tried to redirect the water so it didn't cause too much damage. But the good news is we have chiseled that out. We have discovered that the previous owner of the house has done some amazing things. And by that I mean some really dumb things. What they tried to do, has nothing to do with how to kill a piano, but I thought I would share it with you anyway, is that they covered up the cracked floor or the cracked foundation that was there before by putting a 1/4-inch layer of self-leveling cement over top to hide all of the issues that were down there. Oh, and there were also a couple of drains that they decided to cement over as well. Brilliant. Of course, I've been in this house now for 5 years, so any kind of recourse that I could fight back on is probably impossible in terms of going back to that point of sale. Anyway, that's not why you're here, but that's why this is later than it usually is, which also means this episode is going to be a little bit different than the previous episodes. We are going to diverge from the story for just a moment and revisit that original stage play that debuted on stage when I was just 18 years old. I have a track that I want to play for you. It's a music track from that live show, which means the audio quality isn't the best that it could have been. I was not using professional equipment to record this by any means, but we've done our best to make this track sound as good as it can sound, so you can hopefully enjoy it a little bit. The track that I'm about to play for you is the How to Kill a Piano theme song. Which is kind of weird because you think, well, if there's a theme song, how come you haven't been listening to it this whole time? Well, it's not exactly a song. It's more like a therapy session between me and a piano, because the piano in this story actually comes from my own personal childhood. Now, of course, the childhood that I explain in the story is drastically different than how I grew up, where I grew up, and whatnot. But growing up, we really did have a piano that was down in the basement, and it was a baby grand. It was an old Hazelton Brothers piano that had been in my family for over 100 years. In fact, it's still in my family, but not in my possession because I just don't have a place to put it, unless, of course, it was down in my very wet basement. At the time, I was very interested in the works of John Cage. I still love the work of John Cage, but specifically his conceptual music piece, or silent piece, as a lot of people called it, 433. Now, in John Cage's words, there is no such thing as silence because silence is so full of different sounds and textures. Even if you were to sit in a soundproof booth, where many consider that to be pure silence, you are still left with your own thoughts. Now, the track that you're about to listen to is not a silent track by any means. It is a very textural recording. I would hardly say that it is a theme song of music because it involves me reaching inside the belly of the piano and scraping the insides and strumming and scraping the strings, as well as turning the instrument into a big giant percussion instrument, which is what a piano already is technically because the strings are being hit with mallets on the inside, but really, really pushing that boundary. I'm sure I thought I was very clever at the time. Now, when this was recorded, again, I was living with my folks. I was just about to go off on my university adventure for the first time, and they were not aware of what I was doing with their piano. My philosophy then was that it's better to beg for forgiveness than to ask for permission. And I think sometimes that's still a viable option in some cases, but certainly not most of them. What you're about to hear, of course, is the How to Kill a Piano theme song. You're going to hear me scraping the insides. You're going to hear me strumming the strings. You're going to hear me beating on the music stand, which has a lovely rhythmic sound, springy sound to it. And this, what would happen when folks would walk into the theater was that you would see the piano on stage, like it was set up for a classical music show. You would see a projector screen above that with a countdown clock to the start of the performance. And as the lights went down, this track would play in the dark for 5 minutes and 35 seconds before I stepped out at the start of the show to play basically a mini concert before the main event of the show began. So I'll see you on the other side of this with a few more additional thoughts once you've actually heard the piece. But for now, please enjoy How to Kill a Piano, the theme song. little springy sound right at the end of the song where you can hear the music stand bounce back. So strange. Parts of that I remember when I recorded this, and I haven't really thought about this in a long time, is I remembered closing the cover of the piano keys and beating on that at some points. And also just, there was one particular key on this piano that one of the strings was broken. So if you've ever looked inside a piano, there are several strings connected to one note, which is why sometimes a note can sound out of tune with itself when you strike it. And I had to sort of work around that hiccup point inside the piano because I didn't want to do any additional damage to it. In the actual live show, we had a baby grand piano that was part of that theater, and it began with me lighting the piano bench on fire. And it was actual fire. It wasn't just actually on fire. And somehow we got permission to do that. The end of the show, we had explosions going off inside their house piano. Of course, we were very smart about all of this, and the instrument was not in any real danger in real life at any point in time. No damage was done to anything, but it just still makes me smile to think back as an 18-year-old kid that I was getting to do this cool thing. I want to play one more track for you. This is also from the live show. It's called Controlled Noise. It's how I'm going to close out this week's episode. And then next week, we will get back to the story as scheduled. But for now, I'm going to play us out on a 10-minute track. Yes, 10 minutes, called Controlled Noise. If you're not up for listening to 10 minutes of music along the same lines of the piece that you just listened to, I totally get it. I totally understand. If you're listening to this as a pre-recording rather than this is the week of the podcast, feel free to skip to the next episode. I totally get that too. But hey, thanks as always for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for coming back week after week and listening to this silly little story that has been part of my mental process in life for such a long time. Warms my heart. As always, please share. Please tell your friends. Please bring more listeners. That just helps us. We got our very first monetization payment just the other day from the podcast minions, whoever does this stuff. It wasn't much, but man, every little bit helps. So thanks so much for being here. Thanks for sharing. And thank you for being you. If you've made it this far, and even if you haven't, I'm still George Tait, and this has been another podcast of How to Kill a Piano. If you want to head over to our website and check out photographs of the original Hazelton Brother piano that's still sitting in my folks' living room to this day, go and head over to howtokillapiano.com, and you can, of course, also receive updates and whatnot for what's happening with our podcast. Please connect with me. You can sign up for the How to Kill a Piano mailing list and receive email notifications when the next episode has dropped. You can also route yourself over to our Facebook page, which also keeps updates. Like it, share it, repeat. Because of you, this show exists. Without you, there's no show, and I'm just talking to myself. I'll see you next Monday.